Welcome, Star Wars, and Happy New Year. It's never fun to start off the new year with bad news, but I'm not going to tell you too much that you already know. At least a lot of it, you who have been listening for the past couple weeks, anyway. Look, the writing's on the wall already. The end, the fall from grace has already started. I know a lot of people think that someone with some ideas, some insights, some knowledge can come in and save this thing. But I'll try to illustrate this as in as simple terms as I can. When you have like a favorite pet and you see the early signs that some irreversible stuff has just started, and the most you can do is try your best to take care of your pet and delay the inevitable. Well, that's kind of where Star Wars is at right now. The inevitable, cannot be held off forever. Now, I'm not going to say that the Lucasfilm is going to go out of business and that Disney is going to just lose all kinds of money. But if you expect Star Wars to return to anything resembling what it was when you loved it, I hate to break it to you, but that's never going to happen. Those days are gone. So I hate to be negative on the New Year's. When George Lucas sold Lucasfilm to Disney, no one wanted to be negative at that time. We wanted to have hope. But, like it or not, George Lucas was a stabilizing factor in Star Wars. He had his ups, his downs, his failures. Man, I will never ever shut up about how he defaced the original trilogy. But as far as making new movies, they were only ever going to be so bad. Now, they were going to have some really, really bad stuff in there. There's no excuse for Jar Jar Binks, There was going to be some really bad stuff. But now you've entered into a time when I won't say that filmmakers will get a hold of Star Wars that will do things that will surpass how terrible Jar Jar Binks was. But we're coming pretty goddamn close to how bad the Ewoks were. I mean, the Porgs aren't quite as bad as Ewoks because at least they weren't used to defeat the First Order the way the Ewoks were used to defeat the Empire. But, people have been complaining about cutesy characters in Star Wars since 1983. And for some reason people still seem comfortable coming in to direct, write, and produce films where these cutesy characters are all over the place. And of course they're there for, kids. But here's the thing. Maintaining respect for the Star Wars universe means not doing the same mistakes over again simply to sell toys to kids. Whether you're selling Ewoks or you're selling Star Destroyers, the kids are going to buy them. If you're not selling the Ewoks, just sell more Star Destroyers. That's the way I see that. So, but anyway, here we've got Porgs, so that's a clear sign. And the sign is that they don't care what you or I think. They're going to go with what they've been doing all along, despite the fact that adults complain about it. Kids love Ewoks. Kids love Porgs, apparently. So that's one we have to lose on that front. But, there are bigger issues. Let's say, by some roll of the dice, some event of chance, a director comes in, and this person, writer-director, gives us 3 great Star Wars films. Boom, boom, boom. That's roughly around 6 years of movies as far as Disney's concerned for a trilogy. So we're all feeling like, yeah, Star Wars is back. Well, that person's probably not gonna do too much more than that for the Star Wars franchise. After that person's made his 3, it's quite likely that person's gonna move on to other things. None of these people created Star Wars. The guy who created Star Wars sold it. He's not going to be making any more Star Wars movies. So they're not going to be attached to directing and writing Star Wars films all the time. They're going to pass that off to someone else. Okay, and then we're going to suffer through movies that are just as bad, if not worse, than The Last Jedi, over and over and over again. Okay, and there's going to come a point where anyone with a brain is just going to stop complaining and stop watching, and Star Wars is just going to be another thing, just any old, regular movie that comes out that certain amount of people who were diehard fans or hardcore fans once paid attention to, but no longer. And that's the reality. That's how these things go. When there was one guy with one vision, he had his one set of goals that he could expand upon, like he did with the prequels. I mean, his one set of goals at first was to tell 3 movies, one whole story in 3 movies, and he did that, and he went away for a while, and then he came back and he had more goals, and he accomplished that retelling, or that telling of another story. But then he got married, and I think his wife was like, "It's either me or Star Wars. One of us has to go," and he chose his wife. That's me speculating, but it's kind of a funny speculation if you ask me. So now, who knows what combination of a dozen writers and directors is going to be handling Star Wars in the next decade. But there's going to be a lot of people handling Star Wars, and Star Wars is going to be doing a lot of things that you don't agree with. So really, the question that you're just going to need to answer is how much is enough? When is enough enough? When do you say, I'm putting away Star Wars for good? I've got my DVDs of the original trilogy. I've got the prequel trilogy, and I'm going to enjoy those. I'm going to enjoy characters that are upbuilding and uplifting. I don't need to enjoy characters that need to tear down great characters from the past just to raise themselves up. I don't need to enjoy stories that totally need to tear down older stories in order for them to take their place. And that's the thing, when Marvel makes movies, they realize that, hey, I'm going to want to introduce new characters from time to time. But as I'm doing so, these characters, I don't know what the audience response to them is going to be. I don't know how well accepted they're going to be, or if they're going to be accepted at all. Maybe it'd be a good idea not to tear down the characters that I already know have been accepted. Now, whether you want to kill Han Solo and kill Luke Skywalker is one thing. That's not what I'm talking about. You can kill off these characters without tearing them down. See what I'm saying? No matter how you look at the situation of the storytelling in The Last Jedi, what they were doing with the First Order in these new movies, they did something so cliche and something so obvious by making them this organization that didn't span nearly as wide or as powerful across the galaxy as the Empire did, right? but everything they had was made even bigger, like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times bigger than what the Empire could make. You know, if the Empire's Death Star was as big as a moon, well, the Starkiller base had to be a planet, right? If a Star Destroyer was 1.5 miles long, well, the First Order Star Destroyers have to be 10 miles long. I mean, to what purpose? To what purpose? At some point, bigger and badder doesn't even matter. If all the Starkiller base does is destroy planets, better than the Death Star because it can destroy more and because it's bigger, they still took it out the same way, you know? It was the exact same thing. There was no creativity. In order to make the First Order seem like a threat, they had to compensate for something instead of creating a new sort of threat for them. You know, it was a very easy way out. It was a very cliche way of doing things. Okay, I'm revisiting this universe that has already been, you know, well tread, and in order to make my story look good, I'm just going to have to make everything bigger and badder. Very cheap way of doing things. You know, I mean, and I stood for it when it was just the Starkiller base. But Snoke's ship? Really? Why has it gotta be this, like, ridiculously shaped and oversized heap of metal just passing through space? To what purpose? I mean, if it was a carrier of smaller Star Destroyers, that would be one thing, but it wasn't carrying anything but people, you know? And it's not like they had an overabundance of TIE fighters either. So what was it so big for? Oh, and the AT-AT walkers weren't big enough for you? You know, if you watch Return of the Jedi and watch any of the ships in the fleet at the Battle of Endor on the screen, and then you turn to The Last Jedi and watch any of the ships in the First Order fleet at any of those battles, you won't be able to tell the difference in size. You know? You have to go online to see how much bigger Snoke's ship is than the Executor, Vader's ship, right? So I just, you know, I see at the very, very beginning of this thing pointless storytelling, and I only see it downward spiraling from there. It's going to get worse. You know, it's not going to get you. You're not going to build a great story off of just a terrible foundation. No, at some point, it's all going to crumble. And here's why I'm going to say that the thrill is gone and the story is over. At some point, at this point, I'll say, at this point, there is no one expected The Last Jedi to be as bad as it was. So there's no one in Hollywood ready to pounce on Lucasfilm and just come in and steal the show away from them. So it'll be a while. But at some point, people are going to start smelling blood in the water. And then the sharks are going to come. And they're going to rip Lucasfilm a new asshole. You know, there's going to be another space opera that comes in and steps in where Star Wars left off. And that will be the passing of torch, from Luke Skywalker passing the torch to someone else. It almost happened with Mass Effect. Mass Effect, they got too big for their britches, they got big heads, and they outdid them. They cut out their own heart. But, you know, at some point, someone with a brain is going to come along, and they're going to give the audience what they want. Peace out.